We are in a historical election. This election is unique in the history of British Columbia. Political scientists say there are two types of elections. There are incremental elections. Incremental means small changes. Government remains in government, opposition remains in opposition. A few seats change hands, but for the most part, it's the status quo. Those are incremental elections. And then every once in a while, along comes a transformative election. An election of historic import. And these elections usually result in dramatic changes. The government gets turfed out on its ear. You get a new government, you get a new opposition, you have a new change in the history of the politics of the province. This has happened several times in our history here in British Columbia. In the 1952 election, when the Socreds came out of nowhere to come to power. 1991, when the Liberals under Gordon Wilson come out of nowhere to form opposition. That was a historic, transformative election. And even as recent as 2001, when Gordon Campbell came and won 77 out of 79 seats in the province of British Columbia. That was a historic, transformative election. Folks, we are at another transformative election this time around. This is a historic moment in the province of British Columbia. It is going to change the way BC politics work for another generation. And the choices and decisions we make now, here in Vanderhoof, in the Chaco Lakes, in Fort St. James, in Burns Lake, in Houston, the decisions we make and the vote we cast is going to make more importance and difference to the province of British Columbia than the previous 3 votes you've made. This is it. This is our moment and our opportunity. We haven't had a Conservative MLA in a generation. If we miss this opportunity now, we will lose it for another generation. Now we must act. Now we must seize the opportunity to have a Conservative MLA represent us. If we miss it, it'll be another generation. You have to think about this and share this message with your friends and neighbors. We will make a difference in the province of British Columbia. These choices, these big transformative elections, they don't start in Vancouver. They don't start in Victoria. They start in small towns like Vanderhoof and Fort St. James. They start in small farms where the good heart and soul of the people of British Columbia come together and they talk around the coffee shop and they share with their friends and neighbors the feelings they have about a change in government that's coming. That's where this starts. And it starts small, but it's going to grow and it's going to get big. We have to be the leaders in this province. We have to show the rest of the province the way we need to go. I'm asking you to help me make this happen. The Chaco Lakes is unique. We are one of a handful of ridings in this province that is, in fact, staunchly Conservative. We've held our noses, perhaps, and voted Liberal for quite a while. That opportunity, we don't have to do that anymore. We have a new opportunity. We can build the Conservative brand here. We can build a brand built on fiscal responsibility. Folks, there is a reason this is a transformative election. And part of the reason is that the fiscal accountability of this government has failed fiscal Conservatives of this province. As of 2001, when Gordon Campbell took office, the provincial debt was $33 billion. As of this year, our provincial debt just exceeded $63 billion. The interest payment on that debt alone is $2.6 billion annually. If you can imagine for a moment what you could do in Vanderhoof with $2.6 billion, we'd have a pool! Wouldn't we? We scrape and we scrimp and we save and we have to borrow money and raise taxes and we're paying $2.6 billion in interest on a debt that we're ladling with, burdening our children with.
Exactly.
They have failed fiscal Conservatives in this province, and it is our responsibility as Conservatives to put them back on track. And that's that's what we're going to do in this election. And that's part of what the mantra of the BC Conservative Party is going to be. Folks, there's another reason that this is a transformative election, especially for us here in Northern British Columbia. And that's because we have been neglected. What's the last big project you can think of in Northern BC? The last billion-dollar project. Can you think of one? When was the last time you heard of a single project earning $1 billion in Northern British Columbia? The W.A.C. Bennett Dam. Isn't it, Will? When was that built, Will?
1968.
1968 was the last time we had a $1 billion project in Northern BC. When was the last time they had a $1 billion project in Vancouver? How about
BC Place.
BC Place? How about the Port Mann Bridge? How about a new convention center? How about the Olympics? Does anybody else in this room feel a little neglected when we can't get a swimming pool? I do. I object. I object to the neglect of the North. And it's not just fiscal neglect. It's neglect of the resources that are the foundation and backbone of our economy. What are the two most important things in an economy like Vanderbilt? Natural resources and agriculture. This is the spine of our community. And what have they done to it? The mountain pine beetle swept through here in 2003. They didn't even do a timber supply until 2012, 9 years later. The most punishing part of the Liberal policy that farmers experience is the carbon tax. Did you know the BC Cattlemen's Association said that the average farmer in British Columbia now spends $2,000 a year on carbon tax?
Wow.
The BC Grain Growers Association says that they are on average spending $4,300 a year on carbon tax for grain growers. This is not revenue neutral to those farmers and ranchers and grain growers. This penalizes us here in the North. It is unfair, and the BC Conservatives will repeal it. We will eliminate the carbon tax in Northern British Columbia. It costs us more to heat our homes. It takes us farther to drive to get here. Everything we bring in here, we ship it here. Why should we pay more? The service, there's no bus service here, so we don't receive the benefit of these things. It is time to change the way that British Columbia government looked at Northern BC. Part of the problem is plain and simple, we haven't had MLAs who are willing to stand up for what their constituents needed. This is the gap that we have experienced for the last 20 years. This is the neglect, and it's because of the MLAs we've had. Unfortunately, they valued their party position greater than their constituents. We need that conservative mantra of constituents first and party second. That's what the BC Conservatives stand for, and that's what you're going to get when you vote for Dan Brooks on May 14th.